Okay, I wanted to talk a little bit more about the type of land, the location of land, and a little bit more about the materials you might find on the property that can be very useful to you as you are beginning your homestead or building the first elements or buildings or walkways or bridges or whatever you're going to put in first on your homestead. So first thing I want to talk about is HOAs and POAs. For those of you that are familiar with those, homeowners associations or property owners associations. In the beginning, when I first started looking for land, and I know a lot of people feel this way, I didn't want to go in that direction, right? We see advertisements all the time or real estate listings all the time that say unrestricted land, and we think that's a great thing, right? And it can be good in the sense that you don't have to deal with covenants and things like that. But I will say that not all HOAs, not all POAs are the same. You do want to do your due diligence. I keep using that term, but when you are researching the property that you've found and you really like, make sure you upfront get a copy of the covenants. Usually they'll put those in the listings. But read through those covenants carefully. One big thing that we see a lot of, particularly with homesteads and younger people, Generation Z, millennials, etc., that is the push towards tiny houses. And I'm all for tiny houses, but a lot of HOAs do not look on them favorably. However, that doesn't mean all HOAs think that way. You can find a lot of HOAs where they may have limits as low as, say, 350 square feet in terms of minimum square footage for the property or the building that they will allow on the property. And then there are workarounds as well. So you could do like small buildings and attach them together. So long as they are attached together with a heated walkway, they are considered one structure. You can't have an open walkway connecting them. That doesn't count. But that's one workaround if you have maybe a larger minimum square footage requirement in your covenant. And then, at the same time, you can also reach out to your homeowners association, the board. Sometimes they're actually pretty flexible on that. It's not written in stone. Sometimes these things were written ages ago, and the people that are part of that homeowners association now don't feel the same way, and they're not as concerned about things like that. They're more concerned about other issues, blighted property, abandoned vehicles on the property, people just not taking care of their property, and junking it up. That's really what a lot of them are more concerned about when you get out into the countryside, right? HOAs in cities and suburbs are much different, but in the countryside, sometimes they're a little bit more lax. And it doesn't mean all, but and again, you want to research those covenants thoroughly. Maybe even reach out, find emails of the director, of the the president, of different members of the HOA, or people that have maybe lived in that area before, and or maybe the person that's selling it. Sometimes they'll give you some good insight. Of course, they also they may be a little biased too, so they may be pushing to sell you the property a little bit more, and the honesty may not be as much as you would hope for. So the other thing you need to think about when you're thinking about HOAs and the benefits you may get from an HOA are things like road maintenance, which is a big issue when you live out in the middle of nowhere. Like this property is pretty much in the middle of nowhere in terms of there being no towns within, I would say, a half an hour at least of here. And we're not talking about big towns either. We're just talking about villages. But when it comes to inclement weather, when it comes to snow, you want to be able to at least have the entrance road to the subdivision plowed, so that you can get your vehicle at least up to the driveway. And then, of course, the driveway is up to you. But that's a big step there, is having that access road into the subdivision cleared. You also want to think about things like, they have to lay down more gravel. Usually once a year they'll do road maintenance, and that is very beneficial because you have a lot of washout from heavy rainstorms and things like that. If you owned that property and the access road was, say, a mile long, we've already talked about how expensive it could be to build a driveway that's a mile long. And I'm using access road and driveway interchangeably, and they're not necessarily the same thing. But if your driveway is a mile long, that's going to be very costly to build. It's going to be costly to maintain, particularly if it's in rough terrain, a lot of hilly terrain, mountainous terrain. You're going to get a lot of washout from rain, and periodically you're going to have to put more gravel down, which can get expensive. So those are some of the benefits of HOAs that you might think about. I also wanted to talk about things like protection of your property. You're not always going to be there necessarily. It may be your homestead. You may want to at some point live there full time, but at least in the early stages that may not be possible. So you want to do things like put up a gate away from where the structure is actually being constructed so that it can't be seen from the road. Put up a gate, put up a sign, no trespassing, put up they make a lot of signs that'll say under video surveillance, which can be an excellent deterrent, that so-called panopticon idea. But you need to have something to back that up. You don't necessarily have to have real cameras. You can have some decoy cameras put up. The ones that have the flashing LED lights are great. They run on battery, and you can put them up pretty much anywhere. You just have to replace the battery every so often, and they last a good while. So you won't have to put up those batteries all that often, but they can be a great deterrent for people that might be coming into your property illegally to maybe hunt or fish if you have a creek, or maybe pillage. You have some of your tools are maybe going to be left behind from time to time. I know that with this particular property, I have quite a bit of tools, heavy tools hand tools that I bring in. But once I'm done with the outbuildings, I will probably put some of those and leave some of those here, and I don't want them to get stolen because they're kind of expensive. So just something to think about. A gate is a must. I'm lucky enough at this subdivision that not only will I be putting up a gate on the driveway, which is just over this hill here, the entrance, but there's also a gate to the access road into the subdivision. That is, it's not locked, but they have no trespassing signs all over it, and it's required that it's closed all the time. And it seems to be pretty effective. Neighbors tend to look out for each other because they all have a vested interest in protecting the property. So there's also some people that live at the front of the subdivision that look out for the property as well. Look for people just kind of meandering into it from time to time, which happens. Teenagers, or people with more nefarious designs. You want to watch out for that. So the other thing was accessibility. I talked about yesterday, but think about just how remote you want your property to be. There is, rural, and then there's a remote. I talked about visiting Alaska and places like Montana and out west. A lot of those places the properties can be truly remote. On the East Coast, we don't have truly remote properties as much. And that can be a good thing in the sense that how far removed from society do you want to be? I know it sounds like a great idea at first, to go Henry David Thoreau, but at the same time, is it really healthy to be that divorced from society? You're going to want to be around people from time to time. Or you're going to want to get to an airport, for instance, where you can travel. I like to travel. My wife loves to travel. We are I'm about 40 minutes at my home, my permanent home, from a major international airport, and about an hour or so from a major city. This property it's about maybe an hour and 45 minutes from that same major international airport and major city. So it's relatively close still, which is a good thing, particularly since, you know, for instance, my wife is from overseas, and we like to go visit her family from time to time. So being able to do that and access an airport that isn't that far away is a good thing. Also think about things like grocery stores. I know we don't want to go to the grocery store as much as if you're building a homestead. I try not to do it as much at the home, that at my permanent home. We have a big garden. We like to garden quite a bit, but you still have to go to the grocery store from time to time. It's just not practical to not have one nearby. So think about that. You get into the country, and that's true in this area, there aren't a whole lot of grocery stores. I don't think there are any grocery stores within at least 25 minutes of here. There are a couple of country stores, and there might be you know, a general store, but yeah, there's nothing with a lot there. So think about that as well. Also, you know, in terms of you know, I'm having to come out here right now pretty much every day from my permanent home to do work. So think about things like gas, how far you have to drive to that property, because in the beginning, obviously, you haven't yet built your homestead, you haven't yet built your home, so you can't stay there right away. So you're going to have to travel at least a little bit to get to it and do that work that needs to be done, if there isn't already a structure on it. If you've got a structure, that's great. And there's some workarounds too. You could get you know, an RV or something like that. Pop-up campers you know, those are relatively cheap, and you could stay on the property for an extended period of time and work on your home. And that's a good workaround. And those you know, they're pretty comfortable rather. So that's something to think about. And then finally, I wanted to talk a little bit more about materials and things that you will have on your property. If we go back to, I am a history teacher by trade, or a social studies teacher by trade. So I often think about how things were done once upon a time. I think about the American frontier. I think about how buildings were constructed in the old days. My permanent home is about 200 years old. I restored it with my wife over a period of 5-6 years, and it is the core of it is made of hand-hewn log, and then it actually has the rear portion is made of some very old limestone that was built by Hessians. That for those of you that are familiar with the Hessians from Germany, they were excellent stonemasons, and they built a lot of structures in this area during after the American Revolution and the early part of the 19th century, and really passed on their trade for quite some time. We're kind of forgetting that trade. It's kind of becoming a lost art, but it is a wonderful art, wonderful craft to know, and it's good to see that actually some young people are taking an interest in it again, because it's something that we don't want to forget about. It's so extraordinarily beautiful. If you've ever seen a stone chimney, like the one I have in my house, they are it's a work of art. But you know, piggybacking on that, when you think about stone chimneys, when you think about log houses, all of those things were constructed with materials that came either from the property or very close by. So think about what you've got on the property. I talked yesterday about things like oak. You know, oak in general is just a great material to use to build a log cabin. It's going to last longer than pine. It doesn't have to be oak. Again, I talked about white oak really being the tops in terms of its the quality and how long it lasts, but really pretty much any oak will do. You can also use different other types of hardwood as well. There are, you know, black walnut has been used, locust, black locust. very effectively. Poplar is a very good wood to use. It's easily worked. It's not as hard as oak, so it's more easily worked. There are lots of different types of wood that you can use to construct your home. So look around the property. That was one thing I did before we even closed on this property. I came and I did a survey over several days. I walked the property and I identified all the trees of interest, and I counted, I think, like 68 usable white oak trees. I didn't even bother counting the red oaks. There were just so many red oaks. And again, that's a family of oaks. It can include black oak and pan oak, but there were so many that I figured, it's not even worth counting. They're there. I know they're here. If I need them, I use them. And then there are a few pine trees here and there. There's some white pine, although because there's only a handful, I don't think I'll use those. I think white pine's actually pretty, and hemlock too. There are a lot of hemlocks around here that are quite pretty, and I probably will just leave them alone. And really, I'm not going to take more than I need from the property to construct my house, because I want it to be like it's in the woods, right? You want it to look like it's in a forest. You don't want to clear a bunch of land and have this giant lawn that looks like a golf course. I don't understand the point of that, why some people do that, but to each his own, right? And then the other thing is, when you talk about using stone, when you're talking about building things like foundations and chimneys, look for stone. And that was one thing I looked at here on the property, and we've got a ton of stone. There's stone down by the creek. I don't want to take a lot of it out of the creek because I don't want to disturb the wildlife that's down there. A lot of crayfish and minnows and other fish when the stream is really flowing during its high point season. But there's stone scattered really throughout the property. You can see some of it here on the ground behind me. Siltstone, sandstone, they're used extensively in the mid-Atlantic states and some northern states and in the south as well. You also see limestone, which is really good. Granite can be used too. You don't find it as often, but granite is an excellent stone to use for building a foundation. All can be worked fairly easily. And when I say fairly easily, it's still a lot of work. So you're gonna bust up your knuckles a little bit, and you're gonna be sore. But there's just something about it. Working with stone is I don't know. To me, it's very rewarding, and it's something that I look forward to doing on this particular site. So. Well, that's all I've got for this session, and then we're going to talk a little bit more as we go through the early phases of this homestead. But I hope you've enjoyed and gotten some use out of the things that I've discussed, and I'll talk to you next time.